Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Halal Gap. I am your host, Sofia Alani, and I am joined by.
Your other host, Sikandar, and as always, we've got behind the mics, Asif. Asif, where you at, my man?
What's up?
There he is.
Excellent.
He made
Thank
it.
you. Such a great contribution. So, we've got an incredible guest for you today. Take it away, Sikandar.
He is an award-winning writer and director who has worked on numerous programs for HBO, the BBC, and Apple TV. His short films have been premiered around the world, including at the Tribeca Film Festival and, of course, at the Mosquers, where he nearly swept the 2016 festival. He's a full-time content creator and filmmaker with experience in everything from scripted and reality television to music videos and commercial work, and was recognized as one of London's most up-and-coming talents as a Lodestar 2020. He's currently developing his feature film debut, and joining us all the way from London, please welcome Shehroze Khan. Shehroze, how you doing, my man?
Woo!
I'm good, thank you. My God, you personalized that intro.
You got to do it. And you know what? Maybe the one thing that I forgot to mention that we should absolutely be mentioning is that he's the proud father of now two beautiful children.
One of your babies made a cameo in the back there before Sikandar started that intro, I think.
Yeah. I that might happen a lot. The baby moves from room to room, so I'm so sorry if you guys hear crying or.
By themselves? Are they that mobile already, or do
Totally.
they have a transportation vehicle?
No, our baby's like a super baby. So
Nice.
He's raising the Incredibles over there. It's perfect.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Perfect.
GMO food.
Your next movie.
Right on. So Shehroze, we like to start right at the beginning with our guests. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and kind of, your first experience and interest into the world of film and television.
Sure. So I grew up in a few different places. I was born in London, in Greater London. And then when I was 6 or 7 years old, we moved to Pakistan for 2 years. And then we moved to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, where I spent like 11 years. So up until I was 18, I did my kind of schooling and everything from there. And I was really in Abu Dhabi growing up in quite a boring setting. This was like a time when there just wasn't much to do. You've got a bunch of malls, and really the culture was like kids kind of hanging out at each other's houses, or you're just going to malls and doing like silly things. And so, I just had a group of friends that I really got on with, over time. And it all started when like we discovered Windows Movie Maker on on like Windows XP or like the old Windows 98s.
Absolutely.
And we started like kind of making cartoons on Paint and like animating them and just thinking we were like geniuses. That kind of totally started my love for filmmaking.
Amazing. So, like, was there a desire to do animation ever? Because as far as I know, that hasn't been something you've explored yet. But, like, was that ever a thing you wanted to do?
I think what it was that from a really young age, I loved film and TV, like all of it. I love Disney movies up until now, especially the old school ones. I could watch any of them anytime. Probably still have most of the songs memorized.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think that was the first window of opportunity that kind of showed me that this is a creative outlet that's possible, so I mean, one of the first things we did was like, I think Troy had just come out and The Matrix had come out a few years earlier, and so we did a Troy Enter the Matrix cartoon.
Oh, we've seen it.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Oh, we do proper research on this show, my man.
Yeah, Asif has done the deep dive in capacity as producer.
That's the craziest thing. I didn't even know it's still online. Okay.
Oh, it is. It's on YouTube.
So I mean, it started doing stuff like that. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, maybe 10, and I mean, basically we were recording voiceovers and we were thinking of shots and thinking like of how to make it cinematic, and it was just one of those things where it opened my eyes to the fact that I could come up with an idea have something that I wanted to convey and then show that to people. And so it wasn't that animation was something I really wanted to pursue, but that was what led to, me realizing that the films and TV and stuff that I watch, like I can actually make that myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when you grew up in, you mentioned that you grew up in London for the first few years of your life, and then moved over to Pakistan and then Abu Dhabi. Sorry, when did you move back to the UK? Was that kind of in your early adolescence, or?
It was for university.
Oh,
So
okay,
yeah,
okay,
we grew. Yeah, so I have British citizenship, right? So I'm
right
I'm a
on.
British Pakistani. So it was
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
always on the cards that I was going to go to Britain for university, and I went and did a maths degree. Don't recommend it. And
A math degree. What was the hope with that? Like the
the
career
hope
plan?
was that my parents would see it and be proud of it, and then let me do film. Uh,
You're like, here's something for your wall. I'm gonna
yeah,
go make movies now.
yeah. Here's a
Nice.
very expensive piece of paper, and I'm done now. See ya. Um, and yeah, no, that was it. Like I came back, and then I moved to London. I was in Nottingham for university, and since then I've been in London.
Just to go back a little bit to that entire transition between Pakistan and Abu Dhabi, and then back to the UK, did you feel maybe even in Abu Dhabi, but perhaps even as you moved back into the UK, did you feel displaced at all, or is that something that maybe even drove you more into the idea of escaping into this world of cinema and movies and TV, or did you kind of just naturally fit into the different circles and communities that you lived in?
I don't think I naturally fit in anywhere. And but the thing is, I don't think I thought about it in those terms while it was happening to me, because like when you're kind of experiencing it, like I don't think that you really think of it as being too different to other people's experiences. So when I came to university and met people who had lived in the same town or the same village or the same city their whole life, that was a little bit surprising to me, or just it was a bit of a new experience. While I moved, between a few different places, it was okay, but the thing is, Abu Dhabi in particular is a strange place. And to be fair, Pakistan was strange for me as well, because coming from Britain, my Urdu was horrible, spoke with an accent, so I was very much I'm a lot fairer than, other people around me and even in my family. And so, like, a lot of people, like, made me feel like I wasn't really a Pakistani. And then when I moved to Abu Dhabi, it's a place where, like, everyone like no one calls themselves Emirati, because like it's really 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 difficult to get the passport, and most of the time you kind of need to be an Emirati by blood, quote unquote, to get that passport. And so a lot of the kind of immigrant community, or you'd call them expatriates, they would be people who they would identify by their home countries rather than by what their passport is. So I identified as a Pakistani over there because if I said I was British, people would think I were white. And so that was odd, right? Like, kind of being in that mindset where everyone's identifying by where their kind of heritage and blood is from. Then when I moved to Britain, it was completely different. The political climate of how people grow up and your identity, and the idea of, if you're born and brought up in Britain, regardless of where your parents are from, you are British. You're part and parcel of the fabric of the country. And so just getting my head around where I belong, it was a tough one. It's definitely fed into, like my creativity and I guess feelings of displacement. But at the same time, like I've really appreciated that breadth of experience, and I think there's something interesting, worth exploring, from having kind of different experiences growing up.
Mm. Yeah, I know a lot of people who've kind of had that similar experience, who've grown up in either Abu Dhabi or Dubai, or having this very kind of multinational upbringing, if you will. It's almost that idea of like a third culture child, right? Where you don't quite feel like you specifically fit into one box, and it's influenced a lot of, especially people that I know in the creative community. It's influenced a lot of their work and their kind of their specific lens in terms of how they want to create. So it would, yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts a little bit on whether you do find that that's been the case in your work, but also just kind of wondering, because I remember reading somewhere that you said that growing up, because of, I don't know if that was because of the different places that you were living in or just kind of who you were growing up, that television and shows and movies were kind of your friends, right? They took the place for a lot of your social interaction. So was there a specific, were there specific shows or movies or anything that kind of got you to the point of influence where you thought, you know what, I want to be a creator of this type of content moving forward?
Absolutely. So I grew up like really, really overweight, right? And the thing is, like, it's just something that always, it always stuck with me. It gave me this like complex of like, oh my god, like no one wants to be my friend, or like, I'm just a lot bigger than everyone else in class, and so like, I'll just sit by myself and have lunch in the in the corner or something. And and yeah, I mean, that just kind of made me a little bit insular. And
Mm,
I remember anything that was particularly like aspirational or inspirational, or kind of gave you hope that, like, your life could change, or that you could, you could do great things in life. I
Mhm.
really connected with that. So like Rocky was like my favorite film ever growing up. Mary Poppins was like, I probably watched Mary Poppins like 100 times, like if not more. Just the idea of like transporting into a world of like cartoon and magic and stuff, it was just incredible to me. And so yeah, I mean, escapism and the idea of like really, really feeling this magical sense of like you can be and do anything,
mm,
um, that really spoke to me. And yeah, I mean, in terms of being a third culture kid, I think the thing that I really appreciate about it is that I don't feel bound by any sense of geography.
mm,
Like I genuinely, wholeheartedly feel like a global citizen. Like I could move to any place in the world and just get on, or that, I really don't see country borders in the same way. I don't really see myself as that different from any other human being. And that's something I really appreciated. But more than that, it was that growing up around like a ton of different nationalities, ethnicities, religions. My friend group had like, we had like Hindus, Christians, Muslims, atheists, agnostics, like when we were like 14, 15. And we talk about all this stuff all the time. We were like, we weren't the cool kids at all by any stretch of the imagination, but nor were we like at the bottom of the chain. We were just kind of these floaters, right? Who no one would notice.
Solid middles.
Yeah, yeah, no one would really notice us, but we'd be like on the side, like talking about the meaning of life and philosophy and like incredible, like film analysis and games and stuff. And we would just think we were like the coolest people in the world, even though no one else did. So, yeah.
the young
So
philosophers.
that's, yeah. Man, you should have made t-shirts. That would have been pretty cool.
I know. Should have started a revolution.
Yes, with the Letterman jackets, they would have been like, "Yo, are you on the football team?" It's like, "Nah, I'm a young philosopher." That'd be pretty badass. But so like in that kind of using this as an outlet for like identity and belonging and like connection, I found that like a lot of your films have that theme of connection in particular, or at least the ones that I have been lucky enough to see. And so I wonder, like, do you
Mm,
use it as more of a of like are you writing yourself into these movies in any way, or is it more just like here's a world that I've created that has like been my creative outlet and my way of dealing with, things in my life, and so that's the world I'm creating? Or like are you ever feeling like you're creating a world that you would want, or a world that like speaks to that young child who kind of had a little more of a struggle with that sense of belonging?
mm. I think it's a little bit of all of those things. Like it's very, very tough for me not to write myself into, into anything that I do. But when I'm writing myself, it's kind of more, it's less me writing aspects of my personality or aspects of my, what makes me me, but rather it's kind of more my experience and observations and my friends and like people, places and people that I know, but also just things I'm interested in. So I'm interested in so many things. I'm so fascinated by what makes human beings tick. Why do people do what they do? Growing up in Abu Dhabi, like we all felt like we had a very limited experience. Like we genuinely felt like, man, this is such a bubble. Like we are so hidden away from the rest of the outside world, because you'd watch a show like Friends or like films like American Pie or something, and like our experiences were just so different to that. But what
On
I
that note, sorry, can I just say that like all these white people that I grew up with were like, "Oh my god, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is like the greatest movie." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like that child disrespecting his parents scares the crap out of me. Like, are you joking? That is not something that I relate to or like aspire to in any way." So I totally get what you're saying with
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah, Ferris Bueller is the villain. He's like such a bad kid.
Just the worst. He'd get the crap kicked out of him by my father.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's. So, what was your question? I'm like totally.
Sorry.
I'm just thinking about Ferris Bueller. I'm just thinking
Sorry.
about films now.
You were in the zone. I'm so sorry. But you were saying how
It's
like
fine.
those movies were just so different from your own experience, like Friends and
Yeah,
American Pie and all that.
and the thing is, like, it was one of those things where, like, from a really young age, I noticed that. I mean, there's a lot of things that you don't notice when you're young and you do in hindsight, but like I remember being like 11 or 12 and thinking that, like, I'm never going to like have the experience that the characters and friends are having. The six characters in a coffee shop every day, going back, the relationships and like everything that's going on in their lives. But I'm so happy that I'm getting the insight into why these characters are doing what they're doing, and just being privy to their lives. And I really felt like every film and TV show I've watched, no matter how crap it is, it's given me some kind of a sense into the psyche of people, and that fascinates me. That really interests me. So there's an element of that when I'm writing as well, which is just being really excited about discovering who a character is and why a character does what they do. And yeah, the idea of connection is interesting to me as well, because growing up around diverse groups of people, where when you're kids, those differences don't matter. Like your Sunnis and Shias, like, do never think of themselves as too different. When you're growing up, people of completely different backgrounds, like let's say politically warring nations, don't stop chilling with each other because of the politics of their countries. And then suddenly you go to uni, and you come out and everyone becomes a little bit different, and some of those things sometimes start mattering, some of them don't, but it's just a little bit crazy. And so I think that's just always been interesting and exciting to me, and just something I really want to explore through film. I'm often not telling people answers, in work that I do. It's often me asking questions because I'm asking myself questions. So it's like a self, it's me
And
trying to
I
educate myself.
and I think we're gonna get to that because I think a few of your films have left us with just so many questions.
we're
And
definitely we're
and
definitely
like
going to get to that.
we're gonna get to that. But also I just sorry, I know Skandar, you probably have a more relevant question, but also just wanted to ask you after you graduated with your math degree, you worked on some climate justice stuff, apparently. And I wanted to kind of ask about like that in the sense of like belonging and sustainability because I think like climate is such a like it affects everybody, but like particularly it's going to affect certain parts of the world more, of course. And so like where
Mm.
did that passion come from, and like is that something that as a theme that you are going to explore further in your films?
Yeah, yeah. So when I was in university, I realized really early on that it's very difficult for me to do work that I'm not passionate about. You
Mhm.
know, it's just something that for me, finding the drive to do something that is not important to me, or for whom the bigger picture isn't inherently clear to me, it's I really struggle with that. And when I went to university, I had all kinds of awakenings. I kind of grew up I grew up in a Muslim family, doing Muslim things, but I was relatively more on the agnostic side of things rather than being particularly religious. And when I went to university, I kind of started researching religions, and I became super fascinated by theology, and I ended up, becoming very interested in Islam. And so I consider myself a super spiritual person. And yeah, I'm like, my faith is so important to me right now. In addition to that, issues of injustice became so just something that was so inherently wrong to me, and yet
Mhm.
it just seemed like everyone in the world was like, in some sense or another, complicit in some form of injustice. And it just really troubles me how, the Holocaust happened X many years ago and we said never again, and yet Bosnia was able to happen 25, 30 years ago. And Syria, and just all the things in the world. And so one of the biggest things that always bugged me, because out of all of those conflicts and all of the things in the world that felt somewhat hard to control, the climate crisis felt like it was very easy to control. And I couldn't believe how one of the biggest issues that the world has ever faced
Mhm.
feels entirely man made. And it feels like we genuinely have a way out. We can stop what's going on. And yet
Mhm.
we're pretty much making no effort, or very, very little effort, in order for that to happen. And that bugs me and upsets me so much.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where my real, and I'm complicit in that too. There's a million things that I don't do that I could be doing. So that's where my real passion came from, and it's the root and the impetus behind a lot of the stuff that that I want to convey in my storytelling, right now and in the future, including the stuff that just seems like it's not remotely related to injustice or to climate. Like, I just genuinely think that environmental degradation and our
Mhm.
role in that is so telling of the massive flaw in humanity. Our arrogance. Like, the
Mhm.
first
Mhm.
sin that was created, the first sin ever was Iblis, right? Satan refusing to bow to Adam because of his arrogance, right? And for us, just the most heinous crime that we're committing is our own arrogance, right? And in
Mhm.
being so wasteful to the planet. Anyway, look, I could talk about this for hours. I feel strongly about it. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Thank you for that. I'm also on that same train, so I appreciate your comment.
I too
Yeah.
enjoy the planet. Yes. Uh,
It's great, man.
no, it is. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So just going back to the journey a little bit, and we talked about the upbringing. We talked about how you went to university and decided to take a degree in mathematics, more so to appease your parents maybe than anything else. Was film and filmmaking still a part of the plan at that point, or did you like? I guess my question would be more so: did you feel like that was still going to be the career aspiration, or was it more of a hobby for you through university?
That's a great question, because I haven't actually thought about how different my kind of paradigm was at the time. But before I went to university, I was like so set that I was going to become a director and that film and TV was my calling in my life. I didn't get the chance to go to film school, which is fine. I got to do a degree, and there's a lot of benefits that can come through doing that. You're very lucky if you get the privilege to go to university, because a lot of people don't. But basically, in university, the thing that I struggled with most was that I feel like I lost my creative drive in many ways. You know, I mean, I was involved in the film society at the time, but you know, everyone around there was doing it as a hobby, and there was no one who is like incredibly passionate to the point where they wanted to take it forward. And not having that group around you is quite heartbreaking. Well, there was actually one guy who, funnily enough, has become like a legit Bollywood actor. But
Which one?
so it's, yeah, his name's Rohan Mehra. And he's in a film called Bazaar with like Saif Ali Khan. It's on Netflix, and he's doing a bunch of awesome things. But me and him were like good friends, but you know, we're still like good mates. But like,
Asif just sent us a note on the side saying he has a poster of him on his wall, so he's got one fan. Yeah.
Love it. I'll get it signed for you. So so yeah, I mean, it was like that was the only other guy who was super serious about filmmaking. And then I'm doing this degree that I'm not enjoying, and I'm going through my own spiritual awakening and like being really like upset by like all this injustice that you know, before university, I was the only 16-year-old kid I knew who had 30 scripts on their computer, you know, having like just been so prolific and so like desperate to get my creativity out. And throughout my 3 years in university, I don't think I added a single script to those 30 scripts. So that was 3 years where I literally felt like, okay, I'm going through something. And there was mental health stuff like over there as well. You know, a lot of you can go through a lot of stuff when you're doing something that you really don't enjoy and you don't necessarily see the purpose in. And so I left university with no idea how to enter the industry, with no like real kind of drive. And also I was now 21, and there were a ton of 21-year-olds who were doing great stuff. You know, and so I'm like looking at all the people around me who are like, you know, that was the YouTube boom, where before university, as unfortunately as you've seen, right, we were uploading stuff to YouTube, and we were doing well. You know, we were getting like thousands of hits at the time, and the craziest thing happened. But like we were kind of making some racy, saucy types of like comedy skits. And growing up in Abu Dhabi, I think we were kind of reenacting, me and my mate, we kind of reenacted intercourse. Anyway, his
just
mom...
quickly move over past reenacting intercourse as if we didn't just hear that out loud, but carry on.
So his mom finds this YouTube video.
Oh no!
I think like one of his family members had like I think one of his family members had like sent it to her, and she saw it and was horrified. And she made us delete all of the she made us remove our channel from YouTube and make all of the videos private so that no one else could see it. So that was, you know,
early forms of censorship, man.
That was like this moment where we were gaining momentum, getting 5, 6, 10,000 views at a time when the highest viewed video in the world was like 3 million views or something, and no one else had, you know, those kinds of numbers. So then we deleted that account, and we kind of secretly made another account and uploaded the stuff back into that, but it just never picked up, and so we never continued the YouTube thing. And cut to like 3 years later, YouTube's monetizing, and you've got these incredible people making incredible stuff, and so we just felt like we had missed the curve. And that's another thing that contributed to me thinking like, oh my god, like, am I ever going to, you know, to come back to this, or have I become the person who does a maths degree and then becomes an accountant? And that's, you know, I mean, no, no diss to accountants. Like, if you like it, great. But, that it wasn't for me. And so, yeah, man, like it took me a really long time to gain that confidence and gain that, like, drive to tell myself that, what, this is it. Like, I do need to enter this industry no matter what it takes, and no matter how hard it is. And so I made that jump like 2 years after my graduation.
Hmm. We've had a conversation quite a bit in the last, it's kind of been a bit of a recurring theme in all of our interviews for this season about this idea of the importance or maybe unimportance of formal education and training in the arts, and whether that's something that would be required to feel like a professional, not necessarily to be a professional, but to feel like a professional. And some of the artists that we've interviewed have said, they struggle at times with this feeling of imposter syndrome, almost because they didn't get formal education or training in whatever that is. And I know that this is an art form that you have, for the most part, been pretty self-taught in. Is that something that
Yeah.
you've ever struggled with, in terms of, okay, well, I didn't get a chance to do that same sort of formal training, or is that something that you take maybe even more pride in the fact that you were able to have success despite the fact that you didn't get formal education or training in it?
I think, I mean, just to give you insight, like, I was 23 maybe, when I first had the confidence to call myself a filmmaker.
Mm.
And by that point, I had already done a film called Inspire, which had, been at the Tribeca Film Festival, won a bunch of awards. It had, like, done really well, and I still couldn't call myself a filmmaker. And it took me a really long time to just kind of, jump over that mental hump in my head. And that really changed everything. It just made me feel so light, and it made me feel like there is no difference between me and, any of the greats, other than really working on your craft and being damn good at what you do. And so then it suddenly felt so achievable. And yeah, for sure, man. Like, not having been to film school for a long time, I really felt like I had missed a huge head start that a ton of people had before me. There were definitely inspirational stories around me of people who had never been to film school, and for me, that was, something to aspire to, like Tarantino and, other incredible filmmakers who would say stuff like watching films is your film school. But I just always had this kind of inferiority complex of, like, networking with anyone from my industry and telling them that, oh yeah, I've, like, kind of, done a maths degree and now I'm switching to this. And I also worked for 2 years in the charity sector and as a campaigner, and now suddenly I want to do this. It was hard to explain, like, no, I've wanted to do this my entire life. It's just taken me this long to figure out how the hell to do it, and also to kind of get that confidence. And at the beginning, I remember sending emails and, like, applying to a lot of places where, when I would ask for feedback, the feedback would be along the lines of, you've not, it doesn't really seem like you're interested in media from your experience. And then I remember, like, a year later, I did 2 short films that did incredibly well. And, I had basically built up a lot of kind of self-made experience. And so I had, like, put that, oh, I directed this and I directed this and this won this award and this got this many views. And I remember going to an interview and getting the feedback that I was too overqualified. And I just thought, where the hell do I stand?
What will make you happy?
Yeah, seriously. So, yes, it took a really, really long time to figure out what I need to do, and I'm still on that journey, to be honest.
So I was just gonna talk about you've had like two finalist films at the Mosquers. One in 2016, which was The Letter, and then one in 2018, 2019. That was The Traveler.
28.
And we'll get to The Traveler because I think that deserves its own piece of of discussion. But for The Letter, that was like such a beautiful story that you kind of brought to life, that was based on a true story, and it was so beautifully told in a very short amount of time, obviously short film. But I've heard that on the rumor on the grapevine is that you are hoping to turn that into something larger. So I wanted to see if you could kind of give us a little bit of information on what inspired you to make that movie in particular with that beautiful story, and then what your hopes are for that
Mhm.
story moving forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. And like, I crazy thing is like, I remember so vividly hearing the news that we had won the awards at the Mosquers, because like I was in Turkey having been newly married, and me and my wife were taking like our first holiday, and this was a few months after, and we had just kind of had our first argument the night before, and like we went to bed having not made up, and like I woke up in the morning just feeling like, okay, I need to fix this. And I checked my phone and I found out that we had won a bunch of awards at Mosquers, and I just kind of like freaked out a bit, and then she kind of saw it and she freaked out a bit, and everything was all okay. So you guys saved my marriage.
What a lovely story.
We 100% just found our sound bit for the trailer.
Yeah.
That is it right there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful,
Mosquers.
man. That's awesome.
That's amazing.
But yeah, I mean, the letter was a really interesting experience, because I was actually at my job as the environmental campaigner, and at lunch, I hope it was lunch, I hope I wasn't skiving, but like I was just kind of browsing the internet, and I came across this article that was doing the rounds, like it was just being shared by everyone and just kind of starting to go viral. And it was a BuzzFeed article about this woman who had been estranged from her fiance for 3 years. He was a doctor in Syria, and he had gotten detained by the government and then just gone missing. 3 years later, he turned up in a refugee camp in Lebanon. And this incredible story, heartbreaking, haunting, emotional, and just one of the most moving things I'd ever read in my life, that kind of put me on the verge of tears at my workplace in front of everyone. And it had the most beautiful ending, where this couple reunited at Heathrow Airport 3 years later. And I just read that and knew that this was a story that needed to be told, and I didn't for the life of me think that it would be me who would be involved in that. But like I just knew this is a story that needs to be told. And I just read the article a bunch of times. I could not stop reading it. And then I suddenly looked at the picture that was right at the top, and it was this girl and the guy, and then it was like all of their family members. Like there were like 4 or 5 people in the photo, and I suddenly realized that I recognized one of them. And
Oh,
that
no
person,
way.
yeah, it was crazy. That person had been a colleague like 4 or 5 months previously. And so like I literally messaged her there and then and just said like, what are you doing in this photo? And she said, oh, this all happened to my sister. And so I had worked with this person for like a year and had no idea that her sister had gone through everything she had gone through. And so just over the course of the next couple of months, like it just so happened that my contract at work was kind of coming to an end, and they asked me if I wanted to renew it. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but at that point, because of that story, I just told them like, this is the time where I need to do something drastic with my life. And so I'm going to quit this job, and
Wow.
figure out what on earth I'm going to do after. But I just know that I want to be involved in telling this story for now. So I did that. I got a tiny bit of funding together to kind of make this film. Got in touch with these people, and I told them that like I don't want to tell your exact story because you've just gone through it. I don't want to interview you. I don't want to ask you questions. I want you to do you, recover, heal, whatever you need to do. But is it all right if I make something that's loosely inspired by it, and I can put your tweet right at the end to kind of show people that this is a true story that is happening right now, and you know, the protagonist is someone who lives, you know, thousands of miles away from Syria, and yet they're so affected by that conflict and in so much
Mhm.
turmoil.
Mhm.
So so they gave me permission, went out, made the film, and that was really the start of everything. Like my entire filmmaking career started from that moment when I left my job, I made that film, and then I figured out, what the hell am I going to do next?
Wow. So, like, at the awards ceremony, if you would have been there in person, it would have been like, "Thank you, BuzzFeed. Thank you, former colleague. Thank you to my campaigning job for renewing my contract at that exact moment."
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
incredible.
No, it just felt very serendipitous, and it was like, I mean, it's still something that makes me emotional thinking about it, because it was just so moving. And what happened afterwards is, we were developing a feature film, and I was quite interested in, you know, in telling their specific story. And I just kind of, I went through this journey, listening to kind of people talk about representation, and who, you know, whose stories are, you know, like whose stories we have the agency to tell, essentially.
Mhm.
And I remember having a conversation with them, being like, you know, essentially them saying they're not entirely ready for it yet. And then me kind of realizing, from talking to a bunch of people, particularly like Syrian activists around the issue, that you know, maybe this story is better told by, you know, by a Syrian. So
Mm.
that was kind of the journey we went through with that feature film, which is why at the moment we've kind of stopped developing it.
Mhm.
um, I'm really excited to contribute to that space in some way, but I want to do it in the way that feels best for, you know, for the people who would be involved in the project and in the cause. So
Mhm.
I'm still kind of like on my own journey about, um, you know, whose stories are whose to tell,
Mhm.
and what the best way to go about that is. But with that particular project at the moment, that's the decision that I've made.
Mhm.
So it's 2016. You've made this incredible film. It's getting, you know, the recognition that it deserves. You've quit your job to work on this one. Was that sort of a turning point for you in terms of, okay, now I'm going to be a professional filmmaker, or was it a lot more gradual of a process in that, you know, you get this funding and then you maybe get onto another job, and then slowly but surely all of a sudden you're starting to have to do less more traditional work, and now you're fully engaged in the film and filmmaking world. Tell us a little bit about that transition, if you will, into becoming a quote unquote professional filmmaker, because I know there's likely a lot of people who may be listening who are trying to figure out ways in which, you know, how does that happen, right? How could I become, for example, someone that goes into that career path?
Yeah, I mean, it was long and weird, and a bit random as well. And I think sometimes like that's just how it is. Like opportunities just come up and you kind of take them. Sometimes you're seeking stuff, and like it'll take you down a completely different road. But essentially, I did the letter. I had left my job, and I knew that I did not want to enter into any other industry. So for me, the criteria I set myself was that I want to make an income from film, TV, and, you know, video making. Right. So I started. I had kind of like built up skills by that point, where, you know, I kind of had an idea that I can make a bit of an income by making commissioned films, right? So I did a bit of corporate work, a bit of promotional stuff. You know, this was something I was doing on the side. And just as advice to creatives, like I think it's so essential to have somewhat of an understanding of how you might pay your bills. There's an amazing book called, Like Brothers, by the Duplass brothers. Have you heard of that book?
I have not.
No.
It's really fantastic, you know, because these guys are like proper indie filmmakers who, you know, they made a bunch of stuff. They went to Sundance, and then they self-funded their first few feature films, and you know, right now they're doing amazing things, and both of them are actors as well as directors and writers. But they really stressed the importance of having some kind of an income to be able to support what you're doing creatively. Because if your entire kind of mental energy is spent in doing the thing that you love, and you're trying to be creative, but just you're also trying to figure out how you're going to live, like that's a really good way to kind of like completely drain your creativity. And so for me, what happened was I started doing commission stuff on the side and trying to figure out a way to enter film and TV. I found this this kind of like researcher scheme. It was a trainee scheme by one of the big channels over here called Channel 4. I'd applied to a bunch of them and gotten rejected from all of them, but one of them actually came through, and so I kind of fast tracked from being a runner straight to being a researcher on a factual TV show. So this kind of felt like a huge break for me. But what ended up happening was that I realized only then that like the factual worlds and the fiction worlds could not be more different. The everything from the job titles to the the networking, the buildings that people work from, they're just totally different. No one knows each other from from the two worlds. So so basically I kind of spent 4 or 5 months doing a bunch of those shows, building up some skills, enjoying it. And then one of my mentors over there told me that, like, look, I know that you're interested in drama, in narrative. If you climb up this path, it's a quick path and you'll do well, but you're probably going to have to start from the bottom when you switch over. So he said, look, if you're going to do it now. And so 4 months later, I did the same thing. I left. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I mean, I hope this isn't too long, but
no,
the craziest thing in the world happened. I'm the kind of person who I apply for everything. I really believe that, like, put your, I don't know what the expression is, but put your nets in like all the ponds. And
I have not heard that one before, but I think I know what you're saying.
Isn't there
I think
something about
cast a wide net? Cast a wide net. I think that's one.
Or like put your name in all the hats.
I don't think that's, is that one? I don't think that's one, but
that's
anyway.
totally one.
Put your name in all the hats? I've never heard that before.
Or put your hat in the ring. Never mind.
No, I don't know what's going on, but I think cast a wide net is what you meant to say. Okay, right. Anyway. Yeah. You put your nets in all the ponds, yeah.
Put your nets, all the ponds, catch fish, whatever. Just eat them all. Anyway, I hope you guys watch Seaspiracy, because like we need to stop eating fish.
Oh God.
Anyway. Yeah. So what happened is, one of those kind of came through. I got an interview. I got the job. Oh wait, sorry. What am I talking about? I can't even remember what.
Well, you said. You were saying that I guess it was a pretty prominent opportunity that you landed after kind of moving from the fictional or the non-fictional world into the fictional world. So you cast a wide net, and then something came back to you. We don't know what yet. We're holding our breath.
On the edge of
this is why you never make a horrible metaphor, because it'll mess you up completely. Anyway, what happened was I had applied to a ton of things, and one of the things was this Arabic show that basically just had this like huge pot of money, online, and they just said, oh yeah, submit your CV if you're like interested in being a part of it, right? I had like applied for that maybe 8 months before I finally got an email. So I didn't even remember what it was, especially because I applied to so many things. Anyway, I've left my job and have no idea what I'm going to do. And by God's grace, like a week later, I get this email that's fully in Arabic. And even though I've grown up in Abu Dhabi, my Arabic sucks. So I basically emailed them back and said, hey, I don't really speak Arabic. Could you send me this in English? I tried Google translating it, but it just came out really horrible. And they responded to me in Arabic. And so I just thought that it's kind of some kind of fraud, right? So I just, I think
scam you.
Yeah, some Nigerian prince situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I assigned it to junk. Like I literally just thought this is like some scam email. And what happened is like 2 weeks later, I got a phone call at like 6 a.m. Right, and I mean, I'm unemployed. I'm waking up at like 12, so I pick up the phone, and the woman starts talking to me in Arabic, and I'm like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" So
These
anyway,
guys really don't get it.
I know, I know. And then I told her, look, I don't speak Arabic, man. Like, can you speak English? And she's like, yeah, of course, of course. Just wanted to ask you when you want us to transfer you the funds. And I was like, wait, what? She was like, oh, yeah. We're going to transfer you the funds so that you can make your documentary. And I was like, what documentary?
Who are you?
Yeah, who are you? This is like the exact opposite of the Nigerian prince scam. This is like someone who wants to give you money. So yeah, I mean, I just tell her like, okay, I mean, these are my bank details if you want to transfer me anything, thinking that like there's not a chance in hell she's gonna give me any money. And then a day later, I get a notification from my bank that I've been transferred 70% of the budget of the film, just like that.
Wow.
And that was $7,000. Like it was like significant. And now I'm just thinking, like, aren't they even going to check if I'm going to run away with this money? Like, it was so weird. So anyway, that opportunity comes up, and I plan this entire, like, I'm the entire crew. I'm planning everything. I planned this trip to Kenya. I get in touch with tea farmers over there because apparently the topic that I clicked on was making a documentary around tea. I didn't remember. It's probably in Arabic. It probably said shy, but like, like literally 2 weeks after that moment, I went from being unemployed to being in Kenya and shooting a documentary that was going to play on the biggest channel in the Middle East. And now I've directed and produced something that, you know, is kind of officially on TV, and that was crazy.
Wow. So did they ever follow up, or like you just showed up with the finished cut and they were like, cool, thanks?
You know, there's so many layers to this story that it would take up all the time of this podcast. But to make a really long story short, they didn't follow up at all until the day of delivery. And then I delivered the film to them, and they said that, oh, this film was a bit different to what we initially imagined. And I had emailed them numerous times saying, do you want to watch any of the rough cuts? And they just never responded. And at that point, I said, like, yeah, I've kind of used all of your money to make you the film that I said I would make you. And I begged you to, like, watch any of the rough cuts. And at that point, they said, I think we need you to change it. We need you to do it in like 2 weeks, but we can give you the entire budget of the film again to redo it.
Wow.
So just imagine, this is me thinking that, like, wow, it's really easy to make it as a filmmaker now.
Not the precedent.
Money just flies at you.
Yeah.
And then, I did that. It screened on TV. It did well. It got a lot of views online. And then I never got an opportunity like that again. So it was...
Did you have to do a recut? Did you have to completely recut it then in that 2 week period?
I had to recut and shoot a bunch of new stuff.
Oh, like back in Kenya?
Did you go back to Kenya?
No, I didn't go back to Kenya, but basically they had given me a brief and they had given me a reference for a show. And the reference they had given me was Cooked on Netflix, which is like really artsy and kind of slow and a bit poetic and stuff.
Right.
And so I made this like really poetic, like artsy tea documentary, which I was really thrilled about. And they were like, oh, but we kind of wanted it really fast and snazzy and funny and like shiny. And I was like, okay, I mean, if you give me another $7,000, I'll do that. But like, really weird. So yeah,
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I've seen it because you submitted it, I think, a couple of years ago to the Mosquers. But no, it's No, no, I remember it being like really, really beautiful. I think it was might have been over the time limit at the time, but it was this like beautiful story about tea, and I was like, oh, interesting, very interesting. I mean, never did I think that I'd be watching a tea documentary, but the story behind it is
That's
probably
cool.
just as interesting. Um, so
I love tea. Please send it my way.
yeah, we'll get that wide distribution going again. Um, so you're going through this journey. You're
Yeah.
trying to get more and more work. You're trying to put your name out there, cast a wide net, as we say. And at some point, you're offered a job on a prominent Netflix show, but it featured, from our understanding, I don't know what show it was, but apparently it featured a lot of sexually explicit content. And you decided that, you know what, based on whatever
Mhm.
your morals, your faith, whatever it would be, that's not something that you felt comfortable pursuing. So how difficult was it for you? And I'd also be interested to know, based on the journey that you yourself took, given the fact that when you said when you were in university, you were probably more agnostic than necessarily identifying more specifically as being Muslim. And then, how did that transformation happen for you to the point of where you now are trying to build your career, but also are being very mindful of your faith and your morals? Was that something that was very difficult for you to balance as you're trying to simultaneously get your name out there more and more?
Yeah, I mean, what was really difficult for me was that in university, it was the first time that I was really exposed to people around me who were my age, but were very, very interested in learning about their religion and in properly studying the faith intellectually. And I just thought, like, damn, I'm like 18 years old. I've probably said, Surah Al-Fatiha, like, thousands of times in my life and never ever thought about what the meaning of it is. So I kind of went through one of those types of journeys in university where I was like, oh, if I'm going to call myself Muslim, I should, know what I'm talking about. And if I don't believe it, then I shouldn't call myself Muslim. But I don't want to be someone who says they're Muslim and just has absolutely no interest or understanding of what that actually means. So, and then it became a really, really important part of my identity. It's something that I'm very interested in studying about and learning more about. And yeah, I mean, I'm still discovering what that means exactly in this industry. And it's kind of, although some work is being done and there's some really good scholars who are starting to, be visionary enough to see what the gaps are in media and politics in all of these fields, and how and why Muslims should be should do everything they can to be a part of that. But for me, when I was starting out and I tell people about wanting to go into film and TV, uh, a lot of the time the response would just be that, why am I joining an industry that's just so full of hypersexualization and a horrible representation of Muslims? And the impression that I would get, and it was told to me in explicit terms sometimes, was that I was just doing something haram. And so that's again something that just weighed down on me for a long time until I kind of developed my own understanding enough to just think that that was completely wrong. And being somewhere, or being in an industry, or using the medium of film, which is a tool, right? It's not intrinsically anything, right? You use a knife to, I don't know, to free an animal that's caught in a net, or you can use it to kill someone. I've been watching a lot of Lost again. I've rewatched it. That's why
and
I've got
We
and
need to do a
confused.
full
conspiracy
podcast
and
on just your
casting a
like
net.
metaphors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be so good.
That's another product of like growing up in a lot of different countries. Like, you have references that no one else understands.
Amazing.
And yeah, I mean, basically what happened was, for me, there's certain things that I kind of, I have to figure out for myself as a filmmaker what feels right to me, according to my moral compass in terms of the stories I want to tell. Because there's stuff that I watch and will absolutely love, but there's things I might disagree with. I might disagree with how a certain minority is portrayed, and it'll enrage me. I might think that this type of thing should not be on TV, or particularly after Me Too, hearing accounts of people who have, I mean, forget about the explicit cases of assault, but just talking about women coming out and speaking about engaging in sex scenes, right, with male directors, and feeling like they were pressured to do things that they didn't want to do. And that kind of thing has really weighed down on me, just thinking that I've always been someone who didn't particularly think it was right for two actors to, ironically, because I did it, to simulate intercourse. Like, it just kind of felt like, it's not something that I'd ever be comfortable doing. And like when I made films, again,
Yeah, doing again. Yes, yeah.
that's the caveat.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just basically, for me, the litmus test was like, if I'm going to make a film, like I want to make a film that I can watch with my family without feeling like, we need to like go really awkward and forward it, and like having the whole Pakistani drama of like, oh my God, they're about to hold hands, they're about to do something. So yeah, so I mean, that's still a journey I'm going on. But basically, I was already working in a company, and that contract was coming to an end. I got offered this job by a Netflix show that I really love. And I kind of had to, have one of those conversations again. And it's the kind of thing where I genuinely don't know, if I were in a position where I had nothing else going on, would I have done it and felt completely fine with it? Or is it a case of like, me still being on a journey where I'm figuring out what I feel comfortable with and what I don't? But at the moment, like, what I want to do is absolutely, learn from masters at their fields. I want to work on shows that I like and that I enjoy watching. And I want to be able to also kind of feel a sense of pride about, kind of sharing that work with others, and to not feel even the tiniest bit of like, kind of like shame or embarrassment about something that I just don't feel that comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other things that you've mentioned in that same kind of vein is that you, on sets that you've been on, have never missed a prayer, and stuff like that. So how have those conversations gone, where you've asked people who might not share your faith to allow, you to make those accommodations and stuff when they're working? And how has that, like, do you have any advice for future filmmakers who want to do that and kind of make sure that they are able to kind of do it all and do their job as well as like still maintain what they want to maintain?
Yeah, and I just want to give the disclaimer that like I've only shared that not to sound incredibly holy or anything like that.
Too late.
Just
Too late.
But I am better than you guys, so just so you know. No, no, I mean, like, it's, what's really important to me is I joined this industry thinking that there's a lot of elements of my life and faith that would need to be kept to myself, right? And I know a ton of other people, Muslims and not Muslims, who feel a similar way, and it's a hindrance for them to enter the industry. That it's a part of feeling like you don't belong, that there's not a space for you in these places. And when I did join the industry, I did realize that you can be made to feel like that, but at the same time, firstly, until there's more of us, things won't change. But secondly, if you take the time to explain your requirements and things that are important to you to people around you, you'll find that people are super reasonable and accommodating and nice. And if I've faced issues, like I've faced more issues with brown people or with Muslim people in the industry than I ever have with people outside of my faith or race, So yeah, I mean, I remember being in my first job at the Channel 4 program. And basically at the time, I was just praying in a, in a stairway, right? It was a dusty stairway. And one of the producers of the show, like, must have seen me. I didn't notice them, but they kind of pulled me aside like a couple of days later and just asked me, like, do you, like, do you need some kind of, like, basically, do you have any requirements? Is there anything that you need? And I kind of said, like, no, I'm okay, I'm cool, like, I'm good. um, and he basically said, like, do you need a place to pray, basically? And I told him, like, oh, you know what, like, I just didn't want to bother anyone, like, I've just been kind of praying in, like, the stairway or anything. And he said, look, I mean, if you were a smoker, like, we would make sure that there was, like, facilities for you to go out and smoke, to take those 5-minute breaks, to do what you need to do. If you're someone who prays, like, we need to make sure that you're not in a dusty stairway, if you don't want to be. If you want to continue, that's fine. But yeah, so he gave me a key to a private room which I could enter whenever I wanted, and to go and pray. And that was just the most empowering thing for me, because I genuinely felt like, okay, there is a place for me here. And that experience was it. And if that guy wasn't particularly accommodating, hadn't had the training or insight, it could have been a very different experience for me. But I was just really lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the other side of that equation, right? This is, it's beautiful to hear I guess, hopefully the increasing trend of acceptance within the workplace, if you will, as it relates to the filmmaking industry. And I guess my question would be on the flip side, right? In terms of the actual narrative and programming that's being created, we saw sort of almost like this awakening of Muslim creatives having more of a presence in mainstream media over the last, call it, 5 years or so. In the U.S., you've got Rami and Hassan doing his thing, maybe to a lesser degree even Aziz, and then even in the UK, you've got Guz Khan and Riz Ahmed doing their thing. And a lot of what we've heard from people within Hollywood is that there was more of a conscious effort post-Trump. Did you find similar acceptance of more diverse Muslim stories occur in the UK as well over that period of time, or is there still quite a ways to go within the UK?
I mean, what I do feel is that you definitely see more hijabis on screen. I mean, there are Muslim characters that you see on screen. Like, there's no question we've made leaps and bounds over the last few years. To have someone like Riz Ahmed doing what he's doing, to be in Star Wars and Bourne and, like, all of these films, and then to come back and do films like Mughal Mowgli, which I don't know if you guys have
Oh,
watched. It's a
amazing! Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
incredible.
it's a masterpiece. Like, I just never thought that I would see people like that who I could look up to. And I certainly didn't have that 15 years ago when I was growing up. And right now, to see, yeah, like you're saying, right, the amount of people who are not just faces in the industry, but people who are doing great stuff, that means a lot to me. And I know that for people growing up right now, like, that shatters so many glass ceilings. I think the UK honestly has a long way to go. Like, it's a big deal that someone like Dev Patel could play David Copperfield, and that's all cool.
Mm-hmm.
Huge step. That's fantastic. There's definitely a lot of good that's being done, but a lot of the Muslim representation you got was still, it just didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel like you had Muslim writers behind the work that they're being represented in. It genuinely just didn't feel like, that those voices were being represented. What it felt like was that instead of having stories about terrorism, you were kind of like on the polar opposite, where you're going to have a Muslim who's, I don't know, like, we had all kinds of, like, reality shows come out where, like, you've got the Muslim, like, Muslim Big Brother, or, like, the Muslim, like, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. If you guys know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to explain. But yeah, I mean, those are steps, and they're good, and I think the normalization element of it is excellent. But it's definitely not where I want to be, which is having more Muslim commissioners, having more Muslim writers, seeing more people like Riz Ahmed who are able to play a Dave or a Tom, as well as Zed in Mughal Mowgli, as well as Ruben in Sound of Metal. Like all of, that's, I think that's what, we're aspiring to before we get to see stories that truly feel like, like these have, authentic voices behind them.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, and again, this is just kind of uh, not really something I'd intended to ask, but I guess on the topic, do you think that a lot of that, especially with someone like Riz, is just incredible talent that just can't be contained? You know what I mean? Like where he is capable of playing all these very diverse roles, uh, and that he, as well as maybe even people like yourself, have more of a responsibility to tell more Muslim stories. Is that something that you think about at all in terms of the films that you want to be able to start to make, in terms of intersecting your identity as a Muslim or maybe even elements of your faith within the storytelling itself? Because Riz has done, well, I guess he did Four Lions, which kind of touched on the faith, and Mughal Mowgli, I think, would probably be more culture than religion. But do you think that there is any level of a responsibility amongst these incredibly creative individuals who are now getting more of the spotlight to showcase aspects of the faith or the I guess the Muslim people at all?
I think about that all the time, and it's a really tough question. My opinion on it changes regularly.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I mean, I've heard so many people talk about it. I think the sexy answer to that is I'm an individual. I can't represent everyone, so I need to do what's true to myself. It's a beautiful answer. It seems, like
Yeah.
what a creative should be doing, like what an artist should be doing. Um, but to say that I completely believe that is tough, right? I do see myself as one of a handful of kind of budding Muslim directors in the industry. I'm very often the only Muslim on set. I was on a film where I was the director's assistant, and the film followed, like a Muslim family, and very basic details like when they wear topis and when they don't, or the translation of basic words, or
Mm-hmm.
whether a painting that says Allah would be an appropriate painting to have in the house. Like very, very basic details were things that I was being asked about on set. And if I weren't there, I don't know who the hell would be answering those questions. Because I just happened to be there. I wasn't hired as a Muslim consultant.
Right.
So, I mean, that kind of thing bugs at me. And to say that I don't feel a responsibility to represent in some way would be lying. But at the same time, I think what's important for me and for artists is to not care too much if, like if people are offended or insulted as
Right.
well. Because yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, the biggest sometimes the biggest hindrances to our careers and aspirations are our own community, people from our own faith. And I think it's a real travesty that people of color or minorities, when we enter these spaces, we don't have a blank canvas, right? Like, it's not as simple for me to just make Anchorman, right? Which is one of my favorite films ever. But like, there's almost this expectation that because I'm making it in some way, that there needs to be a representation of a Muslim, or if there's a
Right.
Muslim, that Muslim has to be doing something good, and if they're doing something bad, that I'm adding to the problem, or like anything like that. And I just think that we are putting these burdens on ourselves that's hindering our creativity. And so for me, an ideal scenario is probably more close to what Riz did, which, to answer your question, I do think that it's so much talent that it can't be contained, but also insane hard work, like absolutely insane hard work. I think Riz worked harder than a lot of his peers. I think Michaela Cole probably worked a lot harder and is more talented than a lot of her peers. And luck, no question. You know, if you hear Riz's story, he'll talk about meeting people who were able to get him, you know, through Oxford University when he had an 80% scholarship, but couldn't afford the rest of the fees. You know, he had a scholarship to a private school. He ended up getting one of the first auditions that he went for. You know, like all of these string of things happened. He's talented, but there's elements of luck in that as well. So I don't necessarily have an answer to your question.
No, and I don't think and I don't think it has like a right or wrong answer per se, right? I think it's just one of those, because even with the Oscars, we talk about this a lot in terms of, you know, what types of films do we want to show, and where we settled was, if you're a Muslim, if you identify as being Muslim, your film does not in any way have to have content that is necessarily Islamic or representing Muslims, because from our perspective, just being someone in the industry and being a Muslim is in and of itself combating stereotypes and misconceptions about who we are as a people in a community, right? So, you know, we never put the onus on the individual to say, no, you must create content that looks a certain way. I think just by being you and being in the industry already, there's steps being taken. My question came more so from the fact that I personally had a lot of conversations with people who, you know, people like Rami, or even I'm thinking of people like Misha Youssef, who's got a podcast, Tell Them I Am, who has taken a lot of criticism about, you know, the way in which they present their faith, right? And recognizing that it's their lens, their story, their characters that are on display. But yeah, to your point, you know, a lot of that criticism tends to come from within our own community rather than from the external community. So it's just an interesting area to explore rather than anything that has a right or a wrong answer. So in the interest of time, I want to move on very quickly into some of your work that you have been creating. And we've talked a lot already about The Letter. And, you know, we touched on some of your other works, including The Traveler and one of your more recent films that just came out called Chocolate. And I had a question more generally about your filmmaking, which is that you have these very big ideas that you want to try to capture in you know, oftentimes a short amount of time. And so is that something, you know, given the complexity of the storylines, given, you know, how much you're trying to accomplish in a short period, is that something you're intentionally trying to challenge yourself with, like that you've decided that, you know what, I'm going to do this because of the fact that it is so big? Or has it been more so just specific stories that you wanted to tell, and the limitation of time is just something you have to work within?
I mean, I love the short film medium so much. Like, I just genuinely think it's one of the most you know, exciting things to work with, and I think it's a travesty that you just can't make money off short films. Like, you know, really, I mean, the Mosquers is probably the most money I've ever made off a short film. So yeah, I mean, it always comes from the idea that, like, you have got a general kind of time limit in mind, but you're not writing according to that. You're writing a story that, you know, it will take as much time as it needs to take, right? And then once you've kind of gotten it to a point, in my opinion, well, it's not my opinion, but a lot of great people say this, but writing is all in rewriting, right? And so what you do is you trim the fat, right? You get to the absolute crux of every scene being essential, every scene is doing something. You know, this is the tightest version of the script and of the story. And once you get there and once you're comfortable, you know, you make that happen. And for me, limitations are very liberating in some ways, right? Like, I genuinely believe that limitations can force you to make creative decisions that are just like so much better than the original decisions would ever be. So, you know, when I wanted to make a sci-fi film about time travel, I knew that I didn't have very much money to do that. So I knew that a huge VFX budget wasn't possible, having massive time machines wasn't possible. And so I thought, like, okay, fine, if I want to do this, why don't I just make the idea of him being a time traveler or not vague, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
have it be subjective. It's a matter of like what audiences want to believe. And then I was able to make a psychological thriller that, you know, allowed me to play with elements of sci-fi, but essentially work on a canvas that was very constricted. Most of it takes place in one room, limited locations, limited budget. It's a two-hander. It's just two people talking for a lot of the film. With Chocolate, you know, which is my recent film, you know, all of it kind of takes place in one flat, and the surrounding road, the surrounding like football cage, and you know, it's an intimate story about characters, what they're going through. You know, a young boy learning, you know, what it really means to grow up without a father, what masculinity means to him, and those are elements that just don't require massive budgets. And the thing that I always tell people is like, if you can't tell a story in £0, you're not going to be able to tell a story in £1 million, because storytelling doesn't require budget. You know, it's luxury. So like, you know, tell a story first, and you know, master that, and do that 20 times before, you know, taking £500 to make your first like budgeted film.
That was beautiful. I wish we could end here. I have so many questions because that was just so beautiful. But so that's so interesting because as you're talking about like writing is rewriting and kind of cutting it down, I just read a study yesterday where they were talking about how people like are less likely to subtract even when subtracting is easier from a task. So for example, if they're given like a puzzle and they're like, you know, move this around so that it's symmetrical, they will add more like pieces to it versus like taking pieces out. Even when taking
Mhm.
pieces out is actually like
Yeah,
fewer moves to make it symmetrical is actually easier. And similarly, like when people are writing things, they will write something and then they'll add more words or they'll like add more to it. Or like a recipe, if they're like, hey, improve this recipe, our brains are more likely to be like, what am I going to add to this recipe versus what am I going to take out? So I think it was just
yeah,
like
yeah,
really,
totally.
it's, yeah. And so I think it's very interesting because it seems like you talking about like kind of going to that bare bones kind of more so with the storytelling in a short film, how that's like quite contrary it seems to like what the natural human brain will do. And so do you find that it's like an intentional thing that you're doing, or is it something that's just like it just comes naturally to you where you're just an anomaly to that study where you're one who is like, no, what can I take out to make this like simpler and easier and achieve what I want to achieve with fewer resources and tell the story I want to tell with fewer resources, and just kind of make it easier for yourself in that way.
So, you know, because I never went to film school, for me, I spend hours every day, at probably every single day for the last like 10 years or so, listening to podcasts about films, watching YouTube video essays, analyzing film, listening to directors talk about film. Like it's literally something that I completely immerse myself. A, because I'm so fascinated by it, but B, because I'm genuinely trying to learn. And you know, a lot of this just comes from listening to masters who make the best films in the world talk about their process and, you know, what makes it good. And I'm someone who tries to get in touch with people that I really admire. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I like my favorite director in Britain. His name is, maybe I shouldn't bait this out, but like his name is Peter Kuzminski. He's made these incredible shows like The Promise on Channel 4 about Palestine, and The State, which was about ISIS in 2017, and just incredible shows. And I got in touch with him, right, on this like huge spree to like try and get advice from my heroes. And a lot of the time people don't respond, but he actually responded, and um like I kind of messaged him saying like I'm this like exceptional researcher with a meticulous eye for detail and like scrupulous you know, attention to, you know, to fine details. You know, do you have any time to like meet me and give me some advice? Like I'd be so honored if we could like have a chat. And most of the time people don't respond. I got a response from him like 2 hours later, and I was like over the moon that my favorite director responded. And the email basically said, I'm sorry, but I don't think that you have the attention to detail that you think, because you've misspelled my name 5 times in this email.
Oh no.
And I literally wanted to die, dig myself into a hole. And I thought that my life is over, my career is over, my marriage might as well be over. Like, it was all gone for me.
Oh
Um,
man.
and in that moment, like, I mean, so I kind of freaked out for 10 minutes where I just like curled into fetal position and just didn't know what to do. And then 10 minutes later, I thought like, you know what, this is my make or break moment. You know, this is like, you know, I'm gonna seize this and I'm going to own up to my mistake. And I sent him an email 10 minutes later and said, I'm not worthy of your response. You did not need to respond to me. But because you took the time to do so, you've taught me a valuable life lesson. I'm never going to forget it in my life. I'm never going to make the same mistake. So you've already given me that. And so for that, I'm incredibly grateful. If there's any chance that you'd allow me the opportunity to kind of prove to you that I'm, you know, never going to make a mistake like that again, I would be incredibly honored. But, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, I totally understand. This guy responds to me 2 minutes later and says, would you like to have coffee tomorrow at 8?
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
And I mean, so I'm just telling you that because like a lot of the time people wouldn't get in touch with people that they really admire out of fear of them not responding or whatever reason. And then on top of that, like I just went and pretty much blew the opportunity and still found a way to rectify it. And, you know, a lot of the time people want to help. They'll meet you for coffees. Like directors are, you know, they're not as busy as they make it out to be sometimes, you know, they have free time. So
That's amazing. So just one final thing, which we've been alluding to this whole time, is The Traveler, because that movie showcased at the Mosquers. Literally, so typically when we're done cleaning up and we're done cleaning up the after party, we all go to Sikandar's house to hang out. And it's an after party, and usually the board just kind of like decompresses, and it's a great time. And The Traveler
Till
was
like
a
8 in the
topic of
morning.
conversation. Yeah, till like about 8 in the morning. And The Traveler was a topic of conversation for like 2 of those like hours that we were hanging out, because everyone was like, "Wait, but like what? And
no
like
way.
was he or was he not?" And then when you did the panel a few months ago, it kind of came up again, and as you saw, people in the chat were like, "Wait, before you go, Shehroze, explain The Traveler." Because I think people just they're not okay with the ambiguity and they need the answers. But I think it'd be hilarious if you just didn't answer. But I wonder, like, is there anything you would like to to clarify or to share about it, or are you just gonna let people stew in what you've created with that movie?
That's first of all, that's very humbling. Thank you so much, because a lot of the time you make this stuff, you put blood, sweat, and tears into it. You like spend, you know, ages trying to, you know, put the right balance of how much am I going to explain versus how much do I want the audience to take away, and then no one watches it or no one cares. So the fact that you guys had a huge dialogue about it's really humbling.
Like, and
I know
continuing
for
like several years later. Like, I need you to know, like, we never stopped talking about
Can
it.
I know we're running out of time, but can I tell a quick story about The Traveler?
Please do. Please do.
Of course.
So basically, and this might be advice for people because this has worked well for me, but one of the things once you've made a short film, right, is that you want to get exposure to that film. And sometimes you play it at festivals, it does well, it does okay, but you don't necessarily control who comes to those screenings, right? So I often like to have one premiere event which plays at one of the cinemas that I really enjoy going to. And the thing is, like, you pay for the cinema hall, but because you're screening your short film at a cinema, it really looks like you've made it to people, right? So it's a small, stupid tip, right? But when you premiere your film, just pay for a cinema and invite people along, and it'll go a long way. So anyway, basically I had a list of industry people that I wanted to come to my screening. And so I had those 30 people who, I've given free passes to, and those are the seats that I want. Now, for the only reason of impressing them, I now want a packed theater, right? I don't necessarily care who's there. Thank you if you came. I really appreciate it. But all I really want is for the people from the industry to come and see a packed theater around me, right? And this is just all part of like building hype and, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, we do the screening of The Traveler. We pack out the theater. My friends and family were amazing, and like friends of friends came, and like there was just so much incredible support, right? It was really humbling. But the thing with a film like The Traveler is, like, if you're not really into the genre, it can really not be a great experience. So basically the film finishes and the presenter kind of starts clapping, but no one else clapped.
It's because they're all trying to figure out what the hell they just watched, man.
I think that kind of happened at Mosquers too. There was like a little bit of a delay where everyone was like, wait, what? It's over? Wait, what just happened? And yeah, I think that might be like a thing that happens anytime you screen that.
But I don't think it's a comment on like the quality of the film. I think it's just like everybody's sitting there scratching their head, right? Being like,
yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Their hands are busy being like, what?
Yeah. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, so it was one of those things where, like, the people were asking questions in the audience that, like, people were so confused that the questions that they were asking were just like, it didn't seem like anyone liked the film, essentially. And basically, when I did screen it like a month later at, an audience that, was kind of, specifically for sci-fi and thrillers and stuff, like it was a very, very different experience with how people were engaging with it. And that, again, for me is like, the films that I like are not necessarily films that everyone likes. And so it's the same thing with the films that I make, right? I need to expect a very healthy portion of people to not engage with it and to not like it. And again, just as advice to budding creators, like, don't be so caught up with a bad review or with people telling you that, they didn't like what you did. Because I honestly think, for me, sometimes I could wear that as a badge of honor, because I don't necessarily like the kinds of films that, that person might be watching. With The Traveler, what I would say is, this is a film that all relies on your approach, right? If you're the kind of person who thinks that, this person would be an actual time traveler and that this all could exist in a sci-fi universe, you're going to have one interpretation of the film. And if you're the kind of person who thinks that there's no way that this could be true, and the language in the film was pointing towards, something very, very different, then, there's a lot of care and attention put in the film to kind of allow both of those interpretations to exist. And so what I would say is, everyone's kind of right if you watch The Traveler and have an interpretation for the film. Yeah.
And
I mean,
is
does
it
that answer?
I think that's the perfect answer, but what I will ask further is it kind of like is there any meaning to how you interpret it? Like, is it like a
Yeah.
visual Rorschach test where you're just I guess a Rorschach test is visual. A movie Rorschach test where, like, based on how you interpret it, like, you're a sociopath or something.
Yeah, yeah. So however you interpreted it is the sociopath one. No, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Basically, what I noticed is that people who came from like science backgrounds, scientific backgrounds, just all kind of tended to think that he was someone who had just been through traumatic experience and kind of created that universe. And people who didn't, or came from very like maybe mystical spiritual types of backgrounds, I saw that they always kind of thought, or big sci-fi fans, they always thought that he was actually a time traveler. But for me, the whole thing was really a metaphor for in one sense, the way Islam was taught to me as a kid, and in another sense for dogma, because I got to a point where I realized that I call myself Muslim, and yet I don't know what that means. I call myself a Muslim because my parents told me I'm a Muslim, and everything that comes with that, I have blindly believed it. And so I just thought to myself, like, if you just tell a kid that they're a time traveler, like, why wouldn't they believe that as well? And so it's kind of this like discrepancy between blind faith and dogma, and I guess actively engaging with your beliefs. And then there's a whole bunch of other messed up stuff thrown in.
That's the good stuff.
Awesome.
That's the good stuff. Well, Shehroze, when we started this, before we got on the recording, you challenged us to go to 2 hours, and we've had our record length interview with you, and it's been. We could probably ask you 100 more questions. So sincerely appreciate your time that you've given us. Before we go, though, we like to do a little something called the rapid fire round. We've got a few rapid fire questions, so if you still got a little bit of time for us, we'd like to dive into those, if that's cool with you.
Do it.
All right, Sophia. Sophia, take it away.
Okay, so there's no wrong answer. Oh yeah. Okay, so no wrong answer. First thing that pops into your head. So number 1, what's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
Ooh, I threw my mum's very expensive ring. It might have been a diamond ring, or it was just like one of the most expensive things she's ever owned. I threw it into the sea.
Oh my god!
What were you?
Which sea?
Why? Sikandar's gonna go find it, but also why?
I was just really mad at her. No, I was a kid. I was like 2 or 3, and so I must have just been throwing a tantrum or something, and I threw it. Yeah, it's horrible.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
Yeah, I'm taking therapy.
Wow.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm
So, like,
sure
is
she
Leonardo DiCaprio gonna find it? Heart of the Ocean Jewel situation?
Absolutely, guys. Just dive into the ocean. You'll find all kinds of expensive rings.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, number 2. What is your favorite horror movie, or a horror movie that everybody needs to watch? Maybe not your favorite, but something that you'd really recommend.
A horror movie that everyone needs to watch. That's a brilliant question. Have you guys seen Drag Me to Hell?
Oh yeah.
No.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so Drag Me to Hell is like one of my favorite cinema experiences of all time, because everyone I was in the cinema with did not understand the tone of the film.
Yeah.
And so they were bored out of their minds, and me and my one friend I was with were howling with laughter and also terrified. It is a fantastic film. Sam Raimi, the director of Evil Dead.
Okay, interesting.
It's a good one.
I'm not a horror movie. I went to see Paranormal Activity, and in the theater, and I'm jumpy, and I was holding my popcorn, and like at one point I just like was like, and like popcorn rained down on like everybody around us, and I was like, I can't see these movies in public anymore. Anyway, next question. Who is your least favorite Friends cast member?
Oh my god, that's controversial. It's Phoebe.
Wow.
I have a lot of love for her, but like if she were cut out of the show, I wouldn't be the most upset person in the world.
Ooh, okay, okay.
Wow,
I
fair enough.
respect that answer so much. I'm
Yep,
with you there. I'm
yep.
with you there. Okay, number.
But
Yeah.
Rostock,
Well, I mean, number four.
he's integral to the story. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Number four. Now, this is in reference to chocolate, where a lot of it is interlaced with hip hop and grime music. So, who is your favorite? Or again, we can go back to who is someone that within the grime hip hop genre, an artist that everyone needs to know about.
Ooh, that's really tough. That's super super tough because actually the grime I listen to is kind of like everyone kind of knows it. It's like Stormzy, Skepta.
Yeah,
Like I actually haven't listened to too much
but
underground stuff, but the
well, you know
underground
what?
stuff that we
I
did
feel,
get in the film.
well, I feel
Yeah,
like a lot of people in North America don't even know the mainstream stuff from the UK. So you could even say Stormzy, and people would be like, "Oh, okay, cool. That makes sense."
you know what I would say. There's a YouTube channel called Link Up TV, which I think was founded by Rapman, the guy behind like Blue Story, and he's going to do Shiro Story as well. Which I don't know if it was popular in North America, but it was huge in Britain. And so if you check out Link Up TV, you just have all these up and coming grime artists, and it's really fantastic. It's an amazing platform. So if you are interested, yeah, check out Link Up TV.
Dope.
Okay, and then finally, last one. What's the best or your favorite way to eat potatoes?
Um, so I'm on keto right now, so I don't actually eat potatoes.
Best answer. Best answer.
No, in your former life, then.
In my former life, um, it would just be the creamiest, cheesiest form of potatoes. Like I mean, I like potatoes, but they just need a lot of cream and cheese. So yeah, a mashed version of potatoes that just has a ton of butter, cream, and cheese.
So,
Nice.
so everything possible to hide the taste of
You
a
can
potato. I completely agree with you, by the way.
Get
Yeah, yeah,
out
yeah,
of here.
yeah. You can
Awesome.
see why I needed to go on keto.
No kidding. No kidding. Shehroze, thank you so much for joining us. How can people find you and your work?
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. You can find me on my socials. All of them are Shehroze Creates. You can check out my latest film on YouTube. Just type in chocolate MYM. So chocolate space MYM. And yeah, just my website too, shehrozekhan.com. And yeah, it was an absolute pleasure, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. And we're looking
Awesome. Thank
forward to
you.
seeing everything new that you've been working on. We know you've been very busy on a number of different projects. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to dive into them as much as we would have liked to have hoped. But this was such a great conversation. And I'm sure we'll have you back soon.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Halal Gap. Join us in 2 weeks for our next guest, Daniel Malik. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok by searching Mosquers Film Festival. Thank you to our sound editor, Hamada Arafi, our tile artist, Narmeen Sayed, our video editor, Arish Jamil, and our producer, Asif Qureshi. On behalf of Sikandar and myself, thank you for joining us. Catch you next time.